Welcome to Include NYC Online, Getting Your Child to Be a Good Sleeper. My name is Rich Overton, and I'll be your operational support for today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Keira Moore from Moore Behavior Consulting, who will be leading today's presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm gonna just take 1 second to share my screen here before we start so you can see my presentation. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my slides now. Thank you so much, first of all, to Include NYC for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk about sleep with everybody. I have been hearing from families all over the world, not just in New York and not just in the United States, about how many people are really struggling with sleep right now during this pandemic. And I've been trying to find a way to reach more people and help give them tips and ideas of what you can do to help with your children's sleep during this time. And I was really excited to get an invitation to come in and talk with you guys today. And hopefully, I can give you some good tips and strategies that'll be useful for you. So, today I'm going to spend about 45 minutes talking and kind of giving you my spiel and my best tips to help understand where sleep problems come from and what you can do to help fix them. And then I'll try to save at least 15 minutes at the end to take questions. So as we go, if you think of any questions or anything that you want to talk more about, just like Rich said, type it into the Q&A box and I'll get to as many of them as I can at the end. And I'll also leave up a slide at the end that has some contact information for me if you want to talk with me further afterwards. But I hope that you guys all find this useful and helpful today. And before we actually get into the presentation, I wanted to give a quick little introduction of who I am and what I do, because I think that gives a little bit of context for the webinar. So I'm a behavior analyst, which is a type of psychologist, and I practice ABA, which some of you have probably heard of. And I've been working with children for pretty much my whole life. And I've actually spent the last 15 years working primarily with children on the autism spectrum and with other related disorders. I've spent the last 7 years of my career focusing specifically on assessing and treating sleep problems after I was lucky enough to receive training from one of the experts in my field. His name is Dr. Greg Hanley, if you want to look him up. But he was one of my advisors in my PhD program, and he really taught me a lot about sleep. And I owe everything I know and what I do now to him and his great guidance that he gave me. And currently, I run my own consulting practice focused on sleep problems in both children with special needs and typically developing children. So, unfortunately for me, probably fortunately for you, we won't have time to go into all of the science behind my methods and why I do what I do and all the cool research and data behind it. But today, my goal is to just give you some general ideas of the four main causes for sleep problems in children and then a few tips on how to tackle them. So, unfortunately, no science and data for you guys today. But if you are interested in that, let me know because I got longer talks that I do on that. So let's jump right into it. If my slide will advance. Sometimes they like to be slow. So the first thing that I want to talk about and that I really want everybody to know and understand is that if you or your child are having sleep problems right now, you are not alone. I'm hearing from people all over, like I said, that are having sleep problems and having more sleep problems now that the pandemic has kind of disrupted everything in everybody's lives. Even without the pandemic, researchers think that about half of all children have ongoing sleep problems at some point during childhood. And this number actually goes up a lot for children with special needs. So I've actually seen estimates showing that 75 to 90% of children with special needs experience sleep problems at some point. So whether you have a typically developing child or a child with special needs, the likelihood of them having a sleep problem at some point of their life is pretty high. So it's nothing that you're doing wrong. It's nothing out of the ordinary. Kids have sleep problems and it's pretty common. So If your child's having sleep problems right now, remember it's a pretty normal thing and that it's usually pretty easily fixed with some pretty simple changes. So it doesn't have to be a lifetime problem. Just because they're having trouble sleeping now doesn't mean they will forever. The same thing goes for adults. So more than half of adults in the US have sleep problems at some point. And I think the number is probably actually a lot higher than that. And we've actually seen a pretty big increase in sleep problems both for kids and for adults during this pandemic. The last 5 months, of course, have been really stressful for everybody. So it makes a lot of sense that sleep has been affected. A lot of us are on different schedules right now or no schedule at all, especially with kids being out of school and people being having to work from home. So I think that has really thrown a lot of people off. And then on top of that, most of us are experiencing a lot more stress with all the issues happening as a result of the pandemic, whether it's financial issues, health issues, economic issues. It's really changed life for everybody, right? So it makes sense that people are having disrupted sleep because anxiety and stress, of course, have a really negative effect on sleep, both for children and for adults. So we're kind of all experiencing this together, myself included. I've had, even in this past week, even being a sleep expert, I've still had some sleep problems myself during this time. So another way that COVID has actually made sleep problems worse for us is by forcing us all to be in front of screens a lot more, just like we are right now. A lot of the things that we used to be able to do in person, we're doing over screens now. And we'll talk a little bit more a little later about how screen time affects sleep. But basically, too much screen time can make it hard for both us and for our children to fall asleep. So that's something that we have to really be paying attention to. So before we talk about how to fix sleep, I think it's important to understand why good sleep is important. You've probably all experienced sleep deprivation, and you know how tough it is. But you might not know all the ways that chronic sleep deprivation can actually affect mental, physical, and emotional health, both for adults and for children. These are some of the ways that sleep deprivation can affect people. We can have increased irritability, both for kids and for adults. I know this is a big one for me. If I don't get enough sleep, you don't want to be around me. I get real grumpy. It can increase anxiety. So if we're already having anxiety, for example, with all this stress with COVID, and then we're not sleeping, that actually makes our anxiety even worse, and it becomes this vicious cycle. Not getting enough sleep can make it really hard for us to focus. And that goes for, again, both kids and adults. So, kids at school, kids especially that are doing online school right now, it's already pretty hard to focus on that. That's something new for a lot of us. But it's even harder to focus when you're tired. Stunted growth. This is actually one that a lot of people don't know, but if you're not getting enough sleep as a child when you're still growing and developing, it can actually stunt your growth, and then you end up short like me forever. Behavior problems. This is a big one that we see, especially with kids on the autism spectrum. When they're not getting enough sleep, they have more behavior problems, probably because they're not feeling good and they're irritable. Marital problems. You may not know this, but sleep actually has a huge effect on marriages and marital problems. Again, probably because lack of sleep causes us to be irritable, and it can also cause behavior problems in adults. So we might say or do things that we wouldn't do if we were fully rested. Obesity. There's actually been quite a few studies that have shown that obesity is linked to not getting enough sleep. So, one of the most important things you can do for your physical health, especially if you're trying to maintain a certain weight or you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to get your weight on track, is make sure you get enough sleep. That's actually a really important part. Depression. Sleep can actually cause increases in depression. And again, this is something that a lot of people are struggling with right now during the pandemic. People are feeling depressed with everything that's happening and with having lost a lot of our fun activities in our normal life. And not getting enough sleep actually makes those feelings of depression even worse. Slow learning. Again, this is a huge issue for our kids, especially kids on the autism spectrum and kids with special needs or disabilities. We want kids to learn as quickly and as best as they can. And if they're not sleeping, they're going to have a harder time learning. And last but not least, illness. So, one of the best things that you can do for your immune system is to get enough sleep. And I know immune systems are something that people are really worried about and thinking about a lot right now, right? We all want to do everything that we can do to keep ourselves safe and to make sure that if we get sick or if we come in contact with somebody that has COVID-19, that our immune system is going to do a really good job of defending us and keeping us safe. And one of the best ways that we can ensure that our immune system is going to do its job is to make sure that we get enough sleep every night. So, the next thing that's important to understand too is what exactly is a good sleeper or what is good sleep? How do we know if we're a good sleeper, if we're getting good sleep, or if our kids are getting enough sleep? I consider a good sleeper to be somebody who falls asleep within 10 to 15 minutes of their head hitting the pillow and stays asleep for the whole night and gets an age appropriate amount of sleep, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, so there's three criteria there. You fall asleep within 10 to 15 minutes of your head hitting the pillow, you stay asleep the whole night, and you get an age appropriate amount of sleep. If you regularly meet those three criteria, congratulations, that means you're a good sleeper. Same thing goes for your kids. If they regularly meet those three criteria, then they're good sleepers. If you don't, that means you got some work to do. And those three things should be the goal for your children as well. Okay, you want them to fall asleep quickly, you want them to stay asleep, and you want them to get enough sleep. So that's how we know what good sleep is or what a good sleeper is. As I said before, I'm a behavior analyst, so I study behavior. Most people think of sleep problems as a medical problem, but actually, sleep problems are behavior problems. In ABA, which is the job that I do, we work to change behavior that we don't like and try to increase behavior that we do like. And we do that by changing what happens before and after behavior to try to make behavior that we like happen more and try to make behavior that we don't like happen less. Okay, that's kind of the simple description of what I do in my job. You guys probably all do the same thing every day with your own kids. So, for example, if your child does something that you don't like, let's say they're hitting their sister, you probably use some kind of consequence. Maybe you give them a timeout from TV or a timeout in their bedroom to try to teach them not to do that thing. You might also try to change their behavior before the behavior happens so that it doesn't happen at all. So in this case, maybe you separate the brother and sister when you can tell they're getting annoyed with each other so that they don't start hitting each other. And sometimes when your child does behavior that you like, for example, something like cleaning their room, maybe you might reward that behavior so that it happens again. Or you might do things to try to make it happen more, like reminding them to do it, or maybe telling them you can't watch TV until you clean your room. In all those cases, you are doing behavior analysis. You're doing my job. You're just not getting paid for it, unfortunately. But that's basically what my job is, to change behavior by changing the things that happen before and after the behavior so that we can make behavior that we like increase and make behavior that we don't like decrease. Sounds pretty easy, right? If anybody's looking for an easy job, behavior analysis. I wish it were that easy all the time. Unfortunately, it's not always that cut and dry. But that's behavior analysis, and that's exactly what we do in sleep treatment. Okay, we try to focus on what's happening before sleep and sometimes after sleep to make sure that we can increase behavior that we want and decrease behavior that we don't want. So, when I work with families to treat sleep problems, the behavior that I'm specifically looking at is falling asleep. So remember, we want a person to fall asleep within 10 to 15 minutes of getting in bed, and we want them to stay asleep all night. So to change that behavior, we usually change some of the things that are happening before bedtime, and we focus on teaching what we call good sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is just basically our fancy way of saying good sleep habits before bed that lead to good sleep. And by focusing on changing what happens before bed and by teaching good sleep habits or good sleep hygiene, we can teach children to be good sleepers. And that's a skill that once they have that, they can keep that skill for the rest of their life. So once you teach somebody good sleep habits and you practice those good sleep habits, those can last for the rest of your life if you keep doing them. And that can mean you can have good sleep for the rest of your life, which is really great. People often ask me about using medicine to treat sleep problems. And I always say I don't like to use medicine to treat sleep problems because it's sort of like treating the symptoms, but not the problem. So there's a lot of medicine out there that can make you sleepy, and it will definitely make you go to sleep, but it doesn't usually fix the reasons why you're not getting a good night's sleep. Okay, it's the same idea as if you were getting a backache from lifting heavy things all day at work and you were like bending over and lifting the wrong way. You know, you're supposed to lift with your legs, not with your back. So imagine if you were getting really bad back pain because you were bending over and lifting heavy things at work and you were doing it wrong. You could come home and you could pop some Tylenol and your backache might go away and you might feel better. But then if you go in and you do it wrong again the next day, your backache's going to come back. The same thing happens with sleep problems. There's some medicine that we can give people that will make them a good sleeper, but if we don't fix the actual cause of the problem, those problems are just going to keep popping back up, and we're going to end up having to take different kinds of medication, which has a lot of bad side effects for the rest of our life. So I always prefer to use behavioral treatments for sleep problems, which again just means that we change some things about bedtime. There's a lot of different sleep problems that children can have. Things like trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, waking up too early, maybe refusing to sleep in their own bed, having tantrums at bedtime, having nightmares, wetting the bed, having bedtime anxiety, all kinds of things. There's plenty of different types of sleep problems that kids can have. Regardless of what the sleep problem looks like, they almost always have the same causes, and most of them can be fixed in the same way. So, today, instead of talking about specific sleep problems, we're going to talk about the four main causes of most sleep problems and how we can fix those things that cause sleep problems. Okay? So, the four main causes of sleep problems that I see most frequently are one, kids are not tired. Two, there's a lot of chaos before bedtime. Three, people have unhealthy sleep dependencies. And four, there's too many competing activities going on at bedtime. Okay, so like I mentioned before, sleep problems are usually caused by things in the environment that we can change. There tends to be these four main causes of sleep problems, and all of these can benefit from some pretty easy changes most of the time. Your child might be experiencing one of these problems, or several of these problems, or maybe even all four of these problems. But we're going to go through each of these causes, and then we're going to go through a few quick strategies that can help fix each of them. So, one of the most common problems that I see is that the child is just not tired at bedtime. And this one happens a lot for adults too. So, as we go through all of these things, I want you to think if you have sleep problems yourself as an adult, how you can also apply these to your own sleep. Because all the things we're going to talk about today, even though we're talking specifically about children and trying to fix children's sleep problems, they all apply to adults as well. So, if you're having your own sleep problems, you can think through how these things relate to you as well. One of the best things that we can do for sleep, both for ourselves and for our children, is to only get into bed when we're tired. The reason we only want to go to bed when we're tired is because we want to practice falling asleep quickly. And of course, that only happens when we're tired. Okay, you know, we always say practice makes perfect, right? If our goal is to fall asleep within 10 to 15 minutes of getting into bed, we only want to get in bed when we're tired so that we can practice that behavior that we want, which is falling asleep quickly. So the big question then is how do we make sure that our child is tired at bedtime? Because we don't want to just wait up all night for them to get tired. Some kids are like the Energizer bunny, right? They'll just keep going all day. They might not ever get tired. So there's two main things that we have to pay attention to that will help us to make sure that our children and ourselves are actually tired at bedtime. One of those things is how much sleep the child is getting, And the other thing is the schedule that they are sleeping on. So, as far as the amount of sleep goes, this chart that I have up right now is really helpful. And if, in case you lose these slides and you can't find this later, if you go into Google and you Google sleep chart by age, you will find about 8,000 different versions of this, but they all should have the same numbers. So, you might not know this, but there's actually a scientifically proven amount of time that humans need for sleep at each age. So you can use this chart to see how much time your child needs. Whatever this chart says should be the goal number of hours that your child is getting each night. Okay? So if we look, I'm not sure if you guys can see my cursor on the screen or not, but if we look going down on the left, that has age all the way from 1 week to 18 years. And then if we look going across the bottom as well as the top, it shows how many hours of sleep. Okay, and the black bar is going to be how much nighttime sleep they need, and the white bars show nap times. Okay, so for example, if we look at a 6-year-old, the 6-year-old has just a black bar, and the black bar cuts off at about 11 hours. Okay, so that means a 6-year-old needs 11 hours of sleep a night. They don't need any naps during the day. A 3-year-old, on the other hand, needs about 11 hours of sleep at night, but they need a 1 hour of sleep during the day too. They need a nap time. Okay? So that chart will help you figure out exactly how much sleep your child needs. And this goes for everybody. All children, no matter who they are, whatever age they are, this is the amount of sleep that they need. Okay? And if you're over 18 and you're an adult, the goal is always going to be 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, which I'm sure is really difficult for a lot of people. I know most adults don't get the amount of sleep that they need, and that can be hard. Life gets in the way, people get busy. But you should always be shooting for 7 to 9 hours a night as an adult. Okay? So, first things first, you have to make sure you know how much sleep your child needs. That's step one. Once you know that, the next important step is to set a schedule and stick to it. One of the absolute best things that you can do for sleep, both for your kids and for yourself, is to stick to the same schedule every night. That means going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time every morning. And yes, even on weekends and vacations. I know it's the worst and it seems like a huge pain to say you've got to get up at the same time on the weekends and on vacations and days off. But it is really, really important. If there's one thing, if there's only one change that you're going to make your child a better sleeper, to make yourself a better sleeper, this is the best and most important thing that you can do. I know it seems like a huge pain, especially in the COVID era when we might not be on a normal, regular schedule with school and work. But it's really important to try your best to stick to a consistent schedule, especially for your children. I know for many adults that a consistent sleep schedule sometimes isn't possible due to life's demands and things like changing work schedules, or maybe you do shift work. But for children, hopefully our children aren't doing shift work and they probably have a pretty regular school schedule. So it's usually a little bit easier for children to set a consistent schedule and stick to it. Now, if your child is in school or is about to start school again and they're on a regular school schedule, you probably know what time that they need to be up each morning to get ready for school. So you can make this your consistent goal wake up time every day. And then from there, you'll go back to this chart, check how much sleep your child needs, and then count backwards to see what time their bedtime should be. So, for example, let's say you have a 9-year-old child. They need to wake up at 7 a.m. every day to get ready for school. According to this chart, a 9-year-old needs 10 hours of sleep a night. So if your child needs to get up at 7, if we count backwards 10 hours, that means they should go to bed by 9 o'clock each night. Hopefully I did that math right. And that should be their bedtime every single night. Okay, so every night they go to bed at 9, every day they get up at 7, even on the weekends, even on vacations. If you're able to set a consistent schedule and stick to it, that is by far one of the best things that you can do for sleep. Once you've figured out what your child's bedtime should be, you might have to move slowly to get there. Okay, if your child normally falls asleep much later than what their goal bedtime is, and this is especially a big problem at the start of the school year, right? A lot of times we get pushed onto this later schedule during the summer where we're sleeping in and we're staying up late because we don't have to get up early in the morning. And then all of a sudden school starts again, and now we got to be up 3 hours earlier than we normally are. So that happens a lot around this time of the year. But if your child's normally falling asleep a lot later than what you want their goal bedtime to be, you can't just put them to bed earlier and expect them to fall asleep. Okay, that's not going to work. So I usually recommend that parents pay attention to what time their child's currently falling asleep at night and then slowly move the bedtime back just by 15 minutes each night until you get to the goal bedtime. And always wake them up at the goal awake time. There's no sleeping in allowed on this schedule, unfortunately. It pains me to say that sleeping in is one of my favorite things to do, but I try really, really hard not to do it and to stay on a consistent schedule. Okay, so let's say your child's going to bed at midnight right now, or they're falling asleep around midnight on average. You want them to fall asleep at 10. Put them to bed at midnight tonight. Tomorrow night, put them to bed at 11:45. The next night, put them to bed at 11:30. So just move it back really slowly. If you find that they have a really tough night where they have a hard time falling asleep, keep the bedtime the same. Okay, there's no rush. You have to move slowly with this, otherwise it doesn't work. One other really important thing to pay attention to when you do this is pay attention to how quickly your child's falling asleep. I know sometimes it can be hard to know without sticking your head in to check on them. But generally speaking, I always tell people if you aren't asleep within 20 minutes of getting into bed, get up, get out of bed. Like I said before, we don't want to practice laying in bed awake. And the same goes for kids. If they aren't tired and they're like really visibly got a ton of energy, don't put them into bed. If you know they're not going to fall asleep, don't put them into bed. We don't want them practicing the behavior of staying awake in bed. Okay, but um, when you put them to bed, if they don't fall asleep within 20 minutes, get them out of bed and have them do something boring until they're tired again. Okay, so get them out of bed, have them maybe read a book, or maybe you read a really boring book to them, have them listen to quiet music, keep them somewhere where the lights are kind of low and it's quiet and there's not a lot going on, and do something boring. So don't get them out of bed and be like, hey, you can go watch your favorite TV show, or here's my phone, you can scroll on my phone and go on YouTube. Don't let them do anything exciting because we don't want them to stay awake on purpose so that they get to do fun stuff. But get them out of bed if you can, do something boring until they're tired, and then put them back to bed. Same goes for adults. If you can't fall asleep and you've been in bed for more than 20 minutes, get out of bed, do something boring that doesn't involve electronics until you're sleepy, and then get back in bed. We want to practice falling asleep quickly. Okay, next thing. The next biggest problem that I see at bedtime is chaos before bed, which makes it hard for kids to settle down and get to sleep. One of the easiest and most important things that you can do to help your child fall asleep faster and get a better night's sleep is to stick to a consistent pre-bedtime routine. Having a consistent routine before bed can actually do a few things to help with sleep. First, it can help your kids wind down and transition smoothly into bedtime, knowing exactly what the expectations are. Secondly, it can also provide some time for you to have some special quiet time with your kids before bed, and it can give you a little bit of time to sort of check in with them before bed. One of the most important things about having a regular bedtime routine before bed, though, is that it actually helps your child's body to prepare to settle down and go to sleep. So before we fall asleep, our body actually releases certain hormones that tell us that it's nighttime and that we should start settling down and we should kind of get sleepy and get ready to go to bed. So there's this biological process that happens inside of us that makes us start getting sleepy. Doing the same thing every night before bed actually helps jumpstart that process in our body, and it actually makes us sleepy. So you can make bedtime routines look however you want. and you can decide on something that works for your child. You can have the routine written down in a chart like this one, where you can have your child give themselves checks or stickers or stars for doing each step, and they could even earn a reward for behaving and following the routine if you want. But it also doesn't have to be that fancy. You can just decide for yourself what you want the routine to look like and just start being consistent with it and keeping it the same every night and do whatever works best for you. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. So your bedtime routine can just be short and simple, like put on PJs, brush your teeth, go to the bathroom, get in bed, or it can be a lot longer and it can include all of the activities that lead up to bed. Whatever works best for your family. There are a few general recommendations I make though for families when they're deciding on a bedtime routine. One is keep it the same every night. Okay, so no matter what you decide to do the same thing in the same order every night. My second recommendation is during the 30 to 40 minutes before bed, try to switch over to quiet activities and try to avoid electronics and bright lights. So turn off any unnecessary lights in your house, turn off the TV, the computer, the iPad, put away cell phones. Have your child engage in some quiet, relaxing activities like reading a book, or maybe writing in a journal, or doing a puzzle, or coloring. Something quiet and something that doesn't involve electronics. If you have some free time yourself, this is a really excellent time to get some quality time in with your kids and talk about their day or plan for their next day, or even maybe just have some quiet cuddle time together. Again, whatever works best for your family and for your kids. I also recommend that people try to keep baths and showers to about an hour before bedtime if possible. And the reason for that is that hot baths and showers actually increase our body temperature a little bit. And when our body's getting ready for sleep, our temperature actually drops normally. So if we take a hot bath too close to bedtime, it can actually keep us awake for a little bit. So usually about an hour or so before bed is a perfect time for baths, but you don't want to do it too close to bedtime. Okay, so if you can get that bath time in at the beginning of the bedtime routine, that's the best time to do it. And then one other suggestion is try to keep heavy meals at least an hour before bed. Make sure that your child's not eating or drinking anything with caffeine in the evening. So that includes things like chocolate, energy drinks, tea, soda. Try and limit that stuff after afternoon time. I also try to have kids avoid eating anything really sugary before bed because it can cause a little spike in energy, and then that's kind of followed by a crash, and then they get extra grumpy, and nobody wants extra grumpy kids at bedtime. And along with that, try to limit fluids in the hour before bed and make sure kids, especially young kids, get a chance to use the bathroom and empty their bladder before bedtime. That can help eliminate some bedwetting issues. So do your best to follow those recommendations, but you can design your bedtime routine however works best for your family. Just make sure that you're clear with your expectations for the routine. And don't be afraid to give your kids lots of praise and even rewards if they're willingly participating and following the routine and being well behaved. And again, the same thing goes for adults. Create your own little bedtime routine. Doesn't have to be anything long, doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can just be you put your pajamas on, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, you say your prayers, you get in bed. Whatever it is that you do, and I try to keep the same things every night. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about a little bit is sleep dependencies. Sleep dependencies are anything that somebody needs to have with them or around them to fall asleep at night. Sleep dependencies can be things like a pacifier, a blanket, stuffed animal, a parent, a cell phone, music, noise, silence, or even something like a TV. There are some sleep dependencies that are good because they actually help us fall asleep and stay asleep, but there's also a lot of sleep dependencies that are unhealthy. Even though they might help us fall asleep initially, they're going to make us wake up later on in the night. Okay, so if you have a child that falls asleep quickly, but they wake up later on in the night, this is a good thing to look at. We want to try to make sure that your child has a few healthy sleep dependencies, but we also want to try to get rid of unhealthy ones. So, healthy sleep dependencies can be anything that you have with you for the entire night that stays the same for the entire night and is available every night. Okay, so that's how we decide if it's a healthy sleep dependency. It has to stay with you the whole night, stay the same the whole night, and it's with you every night. So, some examples of that might be a stuffed animal, or a blanket, or even a certain pillow, or maybe white noise or a fan. Unhealthy sleep dependencies are things that don't stay with you the whole time you're sleeping, or change while you're sleeping, or are not available all the time. So, some examples of unhealthy sleep dependencies are things like electronic devices, TVs, pets, and sometimes even other people. The reason we want things that stay with you the whole night and stay the same the whole night is because our normal sleep cycle throughout the night, we have these little tiny micro awakenings a few times each night. So, a lot of you might have heard that we go through different sleep stages throughout the night, but you probably don't know we actually have these little tiny periods where we actually wake up. And that's a totally normal, healthy part of the sleep cycle. When our sleep depends on certain things being present, like a pillow or a teddy bear, if that thing stays with us the whole night, it's really easy for us to go back to sleep anytime we wake up. In fact, we probably won't even remember those little tiny wake ups. But if we fall asleep with things that don't stay with us the whole night, or they don't stay the same the whole night, for example, if we fall asleep kind of scrolling through our phone and then our phone shuts off and we fall asleep and we got to hear, when we wake up, we're going to wake up and go, oh, I got to get back on my phone and have to go back on Facebook and start scrolling again before we can fall back to sleep. So then we wake up fully and it's a lot harder to get back to sleep. So it's really important to think about what things your child's sleep might be dependent on and try to get rid of unhealthy sleep dependencies. I know this is a really tough one for a lot of people. It's hard to get rid of a lot of things, but electronics seem to be the hardest one to get rid of. But I generally recommend getting all electronics out of the bed and the bedroom, both for adults and for children. Electronics really interfere with our sleep in a lot of ways. One way, which is super exciting, obviously, way more exciting than going to sleep. So if you have a cell phone in your hand, why the heck would you want to go to sleep? You got a million things you can do right in the palm of your hand, right? So it's way more exciting to be on electronics than go to sleep. But the other reason electronics in the bedroom are bad is that they cause a lot of light to shine into our eyes, which actually tricks our brain into thinking that it's daytime and that we should be awake. So, that process I mentioned before, where our body starts producing some chemicals to help us fall asleep, actually turns off when we shine light into our eyes, which makes it a lot harder to fall asleep. So, as hard as it is to set boundaries with electronics, both for ourselves and for our kids, if you want to get a good night's sleep, it's really important to try to stay away from electronics before bed and especially in bed or at bedtime. So when you go to bed, plug that phone in and put it on the other side of your room and leave it alone for the night. Same thing for your kids. Don't let them go to sleep with cell phones or iPads or TVs. Set some boundaries with that and don't have that stuff in the bed. It's also important, especially with very young children, to put them into bed when they're sleepy but not already asleep. Okay, this is especially for really young children. We want them to practice falling asleep in bed and practice falling asleep on their own and with healthy sleep dependencies. So that when they wake up in the middle of the night during those normal awakenings, they'll be able to fall back to sleep on their own. So if your child sleeps in their own bed by themselves, try not to lay down with them while they're falling asleep because that's a guaranteed way to make sure that when they wake up and they have those little normal micro awakenings in the middle of the night, they won't be able to fall back to sleep without you and they're going to need to come looking for you. So that's when we get kids creeping into our room in the middle of the night or calling out because they want mom or dad to be there with them. Okay, so if your child sleeps alone in their own bed, try not to be with them when they fall asleep. We want them to learn how to fall asleep on their own as a healthy sleeper. It's important to try to create the best possible sleep environment for your kids and yourself, and to make sure that they have healthy sleep dependencies and help your body quickly settle into sleep. Really quickly, a couple more things you can do to create a healthy sleep environment are try to make sure there's not a lot of background noise. I know for those of you who are in New York City, that's a hard thing in New York. But there's these great white noise apps that you can get on cell phones that are free. If you can put white noise in the background or a fan or some other type of noise that drowns out background noise, that can be super helpful so we don't have noise disrupting us at night. Second is try to make sure there's not light shining into your child's face throughout the night. Again, if you're in New York City, I know it's impossible to ever not have light coming in your windows. But do your best to block light coming in the windows. You don't need fancy blackout curtains. You don't have to buy anything special. You can just do what I do and hang towels or sheets or blankets or whatever you have in front of windows where light comes in to try to block it out. And then another thing is try to keep temperature fairly cool. I know not everybody can control temperature all night if you don't have air conditioning or if heat kicks on and off. But generally, if you have control of that, try to keep the room a little bit cooler. We sleep better when our body temperature is low. Okay, moving right along. Competing activities. So the last big problem I see at bedtime is competing activities. And what I mean by that is there's too many other fun or exciting things to do. So of course the child doesn't want to go to sleep. Having a bedtime routine and shutting down all the fun activities and electronics at least a half hour before bed and enforcing limits that those things are done for the night can be really helpful. So that means that the kids are getting ready for bed. You should take a break from electronics too in solidarity. Don't worry, you can get back to them after the kids are asleep. But you can also try to keep toys out of the bedroom and the bed and try to make sure that things are put away before bedtime to reduce the temptation to want to get up and play with things. So make sure there's not too many exciting things going on at bedtime so the kids are going to want to stay up. One of the biggest competing activities I see at bedtime is kids wanting parent attention and repeatedly getting out of bed to try to get a mom or dad to chat or to get some kind of attention. One thing that you can do to try to decrease that is set aside some special one on one time with your child during their bedtime routine. So the goal is to kind of have them be sick of you by the time they get to bed so that they don't want to talk to you anymore. They're like, Mom, leave me alone. I want to just go to sleep. Okay, so try to spend some time getting that same quality time that you think they're going to be looking for after bedtime. Try to get that in before bedtime if you can. And then one other strategy, really quickly, that I really like and I use a lot in my practice is called the bedtime pass. This works best for kids between the ages of about 4 to 11 in my experience, and it's best for kids that tend to get out of bed either right after bedtime or in the middle of the night. So basically, the way this works is that you would make these little passes for your child, and you can make them out of anything. They can be fancy, like the one on the screen, or you could just write them down on a post it note or a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy if you don't want it to be. You decide how many passes you want your child to get at the beginning of this. If they get out of bed a lot, usually I would recommend starting with the number of times they normally get up and give them that many passes. And then as they sort of learn how the system works, you can gradually start taking one pass away until eventually the goal is that they'll go to sleep with just one bedtime pass. Okay, so basically you give them the passes before bed and they keep them close by. So they tuck them under their pillow or they keep them next to their bed. And then if they need to get up for some reason, they can choose to get up, but they have to bring a pass with them and they have to hand it in to you. So with the pass, they can exchange it for something that they want or need, and you get to set the ground rules for what that can be. But it's usually something reasonable that can be done in less than a minute. For example, a hug, maybe a quick drink, a quick conversation. So they bring you a pass, they hand it to you, they tell you what they want. If it's reasonable, you do it, and then they go right back to bed and you keep that pass for the rest of the night. If they don't have any passes left, they can't get out of bed anymore. If they get up without a pass, you quietly take them by the hand, don't make eye contact, don't say anything, don't do anything, bring them back to bed, tuck them back in. If you've ever seen Super Nanny, it's kind of a Super Nanny approach where they are like, you kind of are like blank face, you take them by the hand, bring them back to bed. Um, the other exciting part about this is if they keep at least one pass until the morning, meaning that they don't use it, then they get to hand that pass in the morning for some type of reward. And again, you get to decide with them what the reward's going to be. Could be a special breakfast item. It could be something that they like, or something like they get to pick out their outfit for the day, or they get some TV time before school. Whatever you think would be motivating for your child, where they're going to want to hang on to that pass. So, like I said, the goal is to get down to only giving them one pass a night and hoping that they'll want to hang on to that pass to earn the reward in the morning. The other thing is if they only get one pass, they're going to be more likely to think twice about getting out of bed. Okay, so let's say they wake up and they're like, man, I really want to go see what mom's doing right now. Sounds like she's watching TV. I'll use my bedtime pass. And then they're about to get up and then they go, wait a minute. What if the boogeyman shows up later? I'm gonna still need this thing. Maybe I better stay in bed and hang on to it. And then we hope that they'll choose to stay in bed and hang on to that pass and they'll fall back to sleep and they'll learn how to fall back to sleep by themselves. So I found this to be a really simple strategy that works wonders, and it is one of my favorite strategies to use. And if you're interested in that and you want to learn more about it, just Google bedtime pass. There's all kinds of great stuff out there on the internet about it. Okay, I want to wrap up so we have time for questions. But one of the most important things you can do as a parent to help with sleep problems is take care of your own sleep. Set a good example for your children. Try to follow the same rules that we talked about today. Try to stick to a schedule if you can. Make your own bedtime routine. Stay away from electronics at bedtime. Try to make sure you're getting enough sleep. Your mental and physical health as a parent is so important, so you have to make sure you're at your best and that you're taking care of yourself. It also makes it a lot easier to deal with bedtime trouble if you're not sleep deprived and cranky yourself. And also, as hard as it can be, try to remember to stay calm during bedtime struggles. Remember, you're not alone. Sleep problems are a very common part of childhood and they can be changed and they can be fixed. It just takes a little bit of work and tinkering with some things. But the more you can stay cool, calm, and collected, the easier it'll be for your child to do the same. And then finally, if you're interested in learning more about how to fix your child's sleep problems and you like to read, I would highly recommend the book by this guy named Patrick Fryman called Good Night, Sweet Dreams, I Love You. Now get in bed and go to sleep. It's actually a really quick, easy read, and it's really funny too, but it's loaded with a lot of good sleep info. So that's a great place to start if you want to learn more about how to treat your child's sleep problems yourself. Check that book out. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's between $10 and $15 last time I saw. Also, if you need any ongoing support or you have any questions that you didn't get answered today, you can contact me through my website, which is right here. It's morebehaviorconsulting.com. There's a little pop-up right on my main page that has a contact me button. And you can also follow me on Facebook. If you go on Facebook and just type in More Behavior Consulting, you should be able to find me. And my Facebook page is all about sleep. And I post a couple times a week with different articles and resources and tips and tricks. You can also contact me through that Facebook page if you have any questions. But I do sleep consultation to families. I also work with organizations. And I also, through my sleep consulting, I do 15-minute free consults. So if anybody has any quick questions that they need to tackle, just shoot me a message and we can set up a 15-minute phone conversation and I'm happy to help however I can. So if you need to contact me, those are the best ways to do it. Let's do some questions. Give me just a second because I need to pull up the Q&A thing here. I'll go through as much as I can in the next 10 or so minutes. I don't want to keep people too long. And then if you don't get your question answered, feel free to contact me. So bear with me for 1 second while I read through a couple of these and try to find some questions that we can get answered. Let's see, we have my family shares the bedroom. My son is 4 and has autism. He wakes up during the night and he stays up, wants to play, and then falls asleep. He has his own bed. The 2-year-old sleeps with me. How can I help him go back to sleep? So I think that question, if you have a child that's waking up in the middle of the night, one of the most important things you can do is look at sleep dependencies. So figure out if there's anything that's changing from the time your child goes to sleep to the middle of the night, okay? If there's anything that's changing, like maybe the light changes, maybe there's noise happening, maybe there's something there when their child's falling asleep that's not there anymore at night. So that could be you or a parent or a sibling or toys or electronics. Think about what might be changing from when the child goes to sleep to the time you're waking up. And if you find something that's changing, then you're going to want to try and make sure that thing doesn't change or that they don't fall asleep with that thing. Another really common cause of nighttime wakings is medication. Okay, so if your child is getting any medication at night, and that includes melatonin, oftentimes medication, especially sleep medication, works for about 4 to 6 hours. And then as that medication wears off and we have those normal nighttime awakenings, it's really hard to reinitiate sleep. So that's always another thing to look. If your child's getting any medication before bed and they're waking up in the middle of the night, sometimes that's the cause. Another thing is food. If they're eating any big meals before they go to bed, sometimes that can cause nighttime waking too. So when they wake up and they're hungry and their blood sugar is dropped, they need a snack or they need something to get them back to sleep. Hope that answered that question. Um, Next question, can any of these same strategies be applied to naps? The answer is yes. Pretty much all of these strategies can be applied to naps. I would also suggest checking that sleep chart to make sure your child's getting the right number of naps and the right amount of time, and that they're getting the right amount of time overall at night. But the best thing you can do for naps is make it as similar to bedtime as you can. Okay, so make a similar little pre-nap time routine. Try to make sure the room is dark. Try to make sure the room is quiet. Try to make sure the child has all the same things they have at bedtime when they normally go to sleep, and try to keep to a consistent schedule. Okay, so pretty much everything we talked about here today, you can apply that to naps as well. Okay, let's see here. Uh, okay, I have a 3-year-old. According to the chart, he should sleep 11 hours at night and should nap for 1 hour. Should I wake him up after the hour is up? Should there be a cutoff time for a child to take a nap? That's a great question. I think that varies a bit depending on individuals. Okay, so if you have a young child who's still napping, look at that sleep chart and first count to see, is your child getting the right amount of sleep overall? So if a 3-year-old needs 11 hours of sleep at night and a nap for 1 hour, then that would mean they need 12 total hours. Let's say your child is getting 10 hours at night and a 2-hour nap during the day. I would say that's totally okay. If they're sleeping well at night and they're sleeping well during the nap and they're still getting the right amount of time overall, perfect. I would also say with that chart, there's a little bit of leeway on either end. Okay, so like I said, adults need 7 to 9 hours a night. Okay, some adults will do great on 7 hours a night. Some adults, like me, will do much better on 9 hours a night. So I know I'm at my best if I get 9 hours a night. Of course, I'm lucky if that ever happens because I'm often too busy to get 9 hours of sleep a night. But I shoot for at least 8. I know if I get 8 hours a night, I'm feeling good, I'm doing all right. I know if I get 9 hours a night, I'm feeling great and I'm doing a lot better. I know if I'm getting 7 hours a night, my significant other better stay away from me because I'm going to get real crabby. Same goes for kids. There's a little bit of wiggle room on either end. Some kids are going to need a little bit more sleep than is normal for their age. Some kids are going to need a little bit less. When I say a little bit, I mean a half hour is usually about the window, sometimes an hour, but some kids do need a little tiny bit more, some kids do need a little bit less. So I would say overall, make sure your kid's getting the right amount of sleep total if they're still napping. If they're getting too much, so let's say they're getting the right amount of sleep at night, but the nap is too long, then yes, you should consider cutting the nap time down a little bit to make sure that they're still getting appropriate sleep at night. We have a question. Will deck be shared afterwards? I'm guessing they mean the slides. You guys should have gotten a handout of the slides. And then also you should be getting in the chat box, you'll get the links for my website as well as my Facebook page. If there's anything else that you are looking for that that was not shared or that you didn't get, feel free to contact me through my site and I can get that to you. Let's see. If my child, who is 6.5, naps every afternoon, will it make it harder to get him to fall asleep at bedtime? I would say probably, but it depends on your child. Again, everybody's a little bit different. If he's still getting the right amount of sleep overall, I would say it's a bit unusual for a 6.5-year-old to still be taking naps or to still need naps. But if you're finding that sleep at night is good and the nap is good and everybody's happy, then roll with it. If I could take a nap every day, I'd be pretty happy. So I think if you have the ability to do it and things are good and your child's falling asleep, then stick with it. If you're finding that sleep is problematic at nighttime, then I would say cut the nap out. Um, would night lights have the same effect as electronics? That's a great question. So that's something that comes up quite a bit. People ask about night lights. A lot of kids are afraid of the dark, right? So a lot of kids want to have some kind of night light at night, and night lights are great. If you're going to have a nightlight, make sure that the room is still pretty dim and make sure that the nightlight is not shining directly in the child's face. Okay? So you want to make sure that if you were to look in to where a child's asleep, that you can't see their face lit up from the nightlight. Okay? If it is, you might want to put something to block the nightlight or put something over it to make it a little bit dimmer. So having enough light that they can kind of see in the room and they don't have to be worried about there being monsters hiding in there or anything, totally fine. We don't want kids sleeping with the night or with like the overhead light on, but we can have a little bit of light in their room. We just don't want light shining directly into their eyes. So hopefully that answers that question. If you have a child that sleeps with the overhead light on and they want their room to be lit up at night, I would gradually work to change that into a nightlight. So maybe you start with a desk lamp and say like, hey, we're going to sleep with this lamp on instead of the light, and then we gradually are going to dim that down into just a nightlight so that the room's still pretty dark. Okay. Light is actually really important for sleep. And again, it's that biological process that it changes. Will this presentation be available online? I actually don't know the answer to that, but I believe Rich does.
Yep, it'll be added to our YouTube page.
There we go.
Mhm.
Perfect. Let's see. I'd love to hear more about how to make big changes, like not going to sleep with a parent there or having a consistent routine. We have a long way to go. That's a good question. So what I gave you today is a quick overview of some quick changes that you can make on your own that you don't need support from a professional to sort of help guide you through this. If you're having really extensive sleep problems with your child and making these little changes don't work, I would recommend that you get some help from a professional, and that can be a behavior analyst like me. It can be a sleep professional. Um, Unfortunately, there are not a lot of other behavior analysts that are doing this work yet. So there's myself, and there I think are 2 other people I know of that are behavior analysts that do sleep work. So it can be a bit hard to find somebody to help you with sleep problems, but feel free to reach out. I'm always available. I'm always happy to take clients on. I unfortunately don't take insurance right now, but if you have questions and concerns about that, please email me. But if you're finding that you need more extensive help, there are definitely people out there that can help you. That Pat Fryman book that I mentioned can also be really helpful. As far as getting a parent out of the room, I usually work pretty slowly through that process, and by slowly I mean it takes maybe a week. That's what I consider slow. That's probably not what a lot of people would think is slow. I never use the extinction or cry it out method. So a lot of people, when they think of sleep treatment or sleep training, they think of the Ferber method and the cry it out and like, oh, I'm gonna have to shut my kid in the room and let them cry and it's gonna be miserable. That's not what I do at all. I actually do a really slow fading of the parent out, and I use something usually that I call time-based visiting. So sometimes what that looks like is we'll have a parent tuck the child in. If they're normally with the child when they go to sleep and the child's going to get upset if they're not there, we have them tuck the child in, step out of the room for a second, come right back, tuck them in again, step out of the room for a little bit longer, come right back, and we work through this process so that the child still feels comfortable, the parent still feels comfortable, but we can slowly fade the parent out. So again, that's something that you usually need a little bit of support from a professional to do that. It's a little bit difficult to work through that on your own. But if you go through and try all the things that we talked about today and you're finding that you still have some questions or you're still having some difficulty, again, please feel free to reach out to me. Let's take one more and then I'm going to end it there. Let's see. Would there be follow-up regarding how to teach a toddler or preschooler to go to sleep in their own bed? That's a good question. Again, that can be a tough one. And that's a similar thing to what I just talked about, where often when I do sleep treatment with families, I'll right away say, okay, night one, we're putting the child to sleep in their own bed. But that usually comes along with we're doing a whole lot of different things. Like sometimes we're putting the child to bed later than normal so that they're extra tired. We're going to have the parent do those check-ins that I just talked about, the time-based visiting. We might do a little room makeover and make sure if they have like really cool new sheets and like get them excited about their bed. So there's a lot of different techniques that we use when we're doing something like trying to get a child to go in their own bed for the first time. So for me, my goal with treating sleep problems is always keep the parents happy, keep the child happy. This shouldn't be a lot of tears. It shouldn't be a stressful and difficult process. Okay. Okay, well, that's going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope that you will find these tips that we talked about today helpful. Like I said, follow the Facebook page for more tips and resources, and that's, of course, all free. And I try to put content out a few times a week. There's also some tips and resources on my website that can be helpful. And I wish you all good luck and good sleeping.